The cowboy thought the Apache woman was just hungry for food, but her hunger was something else. But what could make someone appear hungry for food when something deeper may be at the heart of it? And what might that hunger truly mean? Welcome, friends, to another unforgettable Western story. If you enjoy emotional frontier tales filled with mystery, human connection, and unexpected turns, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for supporting the channel. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, what do you think someone could truly be hungry for beyond food? There is no right or wrong answer, only your own imagination. So settle in, take a breath, and let the quiet frontier carry you into a story where one simple misunderstanding is about to open the door to a much deeper question. She wasn't hungry for food. That was the first thing Caleb Mercer got wrong. The thought would return to him many times after that morning, usually when the wind moved through the cottonwoods and made his porch boards creak like old bones. But at the time, Caleb knew only what he could see. A woman sat beside the dry creek bed less than a quarter-mile from his ranch, wrapped in a faded wool blanket, her dark hair tangled by dust and wind. She looked exhausted. Her boots were worn nearly smooth. Her hands rested quietly in her lap, and beside her lay a small silver bracelet marked with a crescent moon. Caleb had been riding home with a canvas sack of flour tied behind his saddle when he spotted her. He stopped his horse, studied the empty country around them, then dismounted. "You need water?" he asked. The woman lifted her eyes. She was Apache, Caleb knew that much, but there was something in her expression he couldn't place. Not fear. Not exactly. She looked at him as though she were trying to decide what kind of man stood in front of her. Caleb walked to the saddlebag and took out his canteen. He set it on the ground several feet away from her, then stepped back. She watched him. After a moment, she reached for it and drank slowly. Caleb waited. He had learned long ago that silence could be kinder than questions. When she finished, he opened his canvas sack and pulled out a piece of cold cornbread, some dried beef, and an apple he'd saved for supper. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll keep you going." He placed the food beside the canteen. She looked down at it. The wind carried the smell of dry grass across the creek bed. Somewhere behind Caleb, his horse stamped once and shook its reins. The woman did not touch the food. Caleb frowned. "You haven't eaten?" She shook her head. "Not hungry." Another shake. He glanced at the empty horizon. A woman this far from any settlement should have been desperate for a meal. Instead, she seemed more interested in him than the food sitting between them. "Then what are you hungry for?" Caleb asked. For the first time, something changed in her eyes. She looked toward his ranch house in the distance, then back at him. "That," she said quietly. Caleb followed her gaze. "My house." She nodded. He felt a strange uneasiness settle over him. "You know me?" he asked. The woman's fingers closed around the silver bracelet. "No," her voice was soft. "I'm trying to know you." Caleb said nothing. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the creek bed. For reasons he could not explain, he suddenly felt as though the simple meal he'd offered her had never been the real beginning of this encounter. She had come looking for something, and whatever it was, Caleb had a feeling it was something no amount of food could satisfy. Caleb led the woman toward his ranch just before sunset, keeping his horse at a slow walk so she would not have to hurry. She followed several yards behind, the wool blanket wrapped around her shoulders. One hand closed around the silver bracelet. Neither spoke for most of the ride. The Arizona evening settled over the land in layers of gold and copper, while the dry grass whispered beneath a steady wind. Caleb kept glancing back, not because he distrusted her, but because he could not understand her. She had refused food. She had asked about his house. And now she followed him without once asking where they were going. When the ranch finally came into view, she stopped. Caleb turned in the saddle. "You can stay until you decide where you want to go." She studied the small house, the weathered barn, the water trough beside the corral. Then she looked at him. "You live alone?" Caleb nodded. "Have for 6 years." She seemed to consider that answer carefully. "Why?" He almost smiled. "That is a long story. I have time." The words caught him off guard. Caleb dismounted and tied his horse near the barn. "Come on. There is a room you can use." Inside the house, the air smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and cedar. Caleb lit another lamp and pointed toward the small bedroom at the end of the hallway. "The bed is clean. There are extra blankets in the chest." She did not move. Instead, she looked around the room as if every object carried a question. Her eyes stopped at an empty wooden chair beside the stove. Caleb noticed. That was my wife's chair. The woman's expression softened. She is gone. 6 years. He did not explain more. He had learned that grief became heavier whenever a person tried to give it too many words. The woman walked toward the chair but did not touch it. You kept it. Caleb looked at the worn seat. I suppose I did. She turned back toward him. Why? Caleb had no easy answer. Some things are easier to leave where they were. Silence settled between them. Then she looked toward the kitchen table. The food was still there. Cornbread. Dried beef. The apple. Caleb had brought it inside without thinking. You should eat, he said. She shook her head. Not yet. Caleb leaned against the doorframe. What are you waiting for? Her fingers tightened around the silver bracelet. To know if I am safe. The answer was so quiet that Caleb almost missed it. He straightened. For the first time, he understood that her hunger had never been the strange part. The strange part was that she had traveled this far carrying fear like another piece of luggage. You are safe here, he said. She looked directly into his eyes. How do I know? Caleb thought for a moment. Then he stepped away from the doorway, leaving the hall completely open. You do not have to know tonight. He walked into the kitchen and sat down at the table without looking back. A few seconds passed. Then he heard the soft scrape of a chair. She had chosen the seat nearest the open doorway. Not the bedroom. Not the chair by the stove. The doorway. Caleb understood. She needed to see the way out. He said nothing. Outside, the last light disappeared behind the distant hills. And for the first time since she had arrived, the woman allowed herself to close her eyes. Morning came quietly to Caleb Mercer's ranch, with pale sunlight slipping through the kitchen window and turning the dust in the air to gold. He woke before sunrise, as he always did, but this morning he did not walk straight to the barn. He stopped in the hallway and looked toward the small bedroom. The door was open. The bed had not been touched. Caleb found the woman sitting on the porch steps instead, wrapped in the same wool blanket, watching the eastern sky brighten over the cottonwoods. Could not sleep, he asked. She shook her head. Too many quiet places. Caleb understood more than he wanted to admit. He brought 2 cups of coffee outside, then remembered she might not drink it. He set one beside her without asking. She looked at the cup, then at him. You watch everything, she said. Caleb sat on the opposite side of the steps. Ranching teaches a man to notice things. Her eyes moved toward the barn. You notice people too. Caleb gave a faint smile. Sometimes. She studied him for several seconds. Then she asked, why did you help me? Caleb looked across the pasture. Because you needed help. That is not always enough. Her words carried something heavier than the morning air. Caleb did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched an old mare near the fence. The animal stood apart from the others, waiting for him to bring her feed. Caleb rose, walked to the barn, and returned with a small bucket. He placed it beside the mare and waited until she began eating. When he came back, the woman was still watching him. You feed her first, she said. She is old. So you keep what is old. Caleb glanced toward the empty chair inside the house, visible through the open door. He understood what she meant. Some things still have value. She looked down at her silver bracelet. The crescent moon caught the sunlight for a moment. My mother gave me this. Caleb nodded. It is beautiful. She said I should keep it until I found a place where I could stop running. Caleb looked at her carefully. Is that why you came here? She did not answer. Instead, she asked, do you always live this quietly? Mostly. Does it ever get lonely? Caleb looked toward the horizon. Yes. That single word seemed to surprise her. She had expected a stronger answer. Maybe that was why she smiled for the first time. It was small, almost uncertain, but Caleb noticed it. You understand loneliness, she said. I understand enough. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. A few dry leaves crossed the porch and disappeared into the grass. For a while, neither spoke. Then the woman reached for the coffee Caleb had left beside her. She took one careful sip. Too bitter, she said. Caleb laughed softly. That is because you are drinking mine. She looked at the cup, then back at him. You gave it to me. I did. She took another sip anyway. Caleb noticed something else then. She was no longer watching the road. She was watching him. And for the first time, he wondered if she had not come to his ranch simply because she needed somewhere safe. Maybe she had come because, somewhere along the trail, she had heard something about the man who lived alone in the desert. A man who noticed old horses. A man who kept empty chairs. A man who gave away his supper without asking what it would cost him. Caleb did not know who had told her about him, but the way she looked at him made one thing clear. She was not trying to learn where he lived. She was trying to learn who he was. By late morning, the quiet around Caleb Mercer's ranch had changed. Nothing looked different at first. The same dry hills stood beneath the pale Arizona sky. The same cottonwoods moved beside the creek. But Caleb noticed the woman watching the road more often. She had stopped asking questions about the ranch. Now she listened whenever a distant sound carried across the open land. Caleb was repairing a loose hinge on the barn when he heard her call his name. Caleb. He looked up. She stood beside the porch, the silver bracelet resting in her palm. What is it? He asked. She walked closer but stopped several feet away. Someone may come here. Caleb set down the hammer. Who? Her eyes moved toward the southern trail. Men from the trading post. Caleb knew the place. Crow's trading post sat nearly 20 miles south, where freight wagons stopped for supplies and travelers exchanged news. Silas Crow owned it, a careful businessman with a reputation for knowing everything that happened within 100 miles. Why would they come looking for you? Caleb asked. The woman lowered her eyes. Because of this. She held up the bracelet. Caleb remembered seeing the crescent moon the day before, but now he noticed the faint markings around its edge. They were not decorative. They looked deliberate, almost like letters. What does it mean? He asked. My family name. Caleb looked again. And Crow wants it. She nodded. He wants what it proves. The answer left Caleb uneasy. Before he could ask more, the sound of horses drifted across the valley. Not close. Maybe 2 miles away. But the woman heard it too. Her shoulders stiffened. Caleb walked toward the porch. You can stay inside. She shook her head. No, then stay here. She looked at him. You are not afraid? Caleb glanced toward the road. Should I be? A faint smile touched her face. Most men would ask me to leave. Caleb looked at the empty pasture. Most men are not responsible for their own decisions. The riders appeared a few minutes later, 2 horses moving slowly through the dust. A third rider followed behind them. Caleb recognized the lead horse before he recognized the man. Silas Crow dismounted near the fence, brushed dust from his coat, and smiled as though he had arrived for an ordinary visit. Morning, Mercer. Crow. Silas looked past Caleb toward the porch. His smile disappeared for only a second. Then it returned. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Caleb did not move. I do not believe I have anything of yours. Silas reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. That woman is under contract to return to the trading post. The woman stepped forward. That is not true. Silas looked at her calmly. You signed the agreement. Caleb glanced at her. She did not look frightened now. She looked tired. I was 16, she said. The wind seemed to stop for a moment. Caleb looked at the paper in Silas's hand, then at the silver bracelet. Suddenly the pieces began to fit together. This was never about food. It was never even about the ranch. Someone had spent years making decisions for a woman who had finally decided to make one for herself. Caleb folded his arms. She is not going anywhere unless she chooses to. Silas stared at him for a long moment. Then his eyes settled on the silver crescent. You really do not know what that bracelet is worth, do you? Caleb looked at the woman. She met his eyes. And for the first time, he saw something in her expression that was not fear. It was trust. Silas Crow folded the paper and slipped it back inside his coat. You are making a mistake, Mercer. Caleb did not answer. He watched the man mount his horse, then disappeared down the southern trail with the other riders. Dust hung in the morning air long after they were gone. The woman remained on the porch, still holding the silver bracelet. He will come back, she said. Caleb looked at her. Then we will deal with that when he does. She lowered her eyes. You should not have done that. Done what? Believed me. Caleb walked toward the kitchen. I did not say I believed everything. I said you could choose where you went. She followed him inside. The house felt different now. Smaller, somehow. The sunlight through the window fell across the old wooden table, the same table where Caleb had eaten alone for 6 years. He pulled out a chair. Sit down. She did. Caleb placed fresh coffee on the table, then warmed the remaining cornbread in a skillet. He set a plate in front of her. This time, she did not refuse. She broke off a small piece and ate slowly. Caleb sat across from her. You said the bracelet proves something. She nodded. My father owned land near the San Pedro River. Caleb waited. Not a ranch. A family place. My mother grew corn there. My father kept horses. We had a small house. Her voice softened. Then the trading company came. Caleb understood enough about frontier business to know what that meant. Land could change hands with a signature. A promise could become a contract. A contract could become a chain around someone's future. Crow wanted the land, he asked. He wanted the water. She touched the silver crescent. The bracelet carries the mark of my family. It was proof that the land belonged to us before the company arrived. Caleb leaned back. And the paper? A document saying my family surrendered everything. She looked at him. My mother never signed it. Caleb studied her face. Then why did Crow say you did? Because when my parents disappeared, I was the only one left who could challenge him. She paused. I was 16. I did not understand the law. He gave me food, a place to sleep, and papers I could not read. Caleb looked toward the kitchen window. The desert stretched beyond it, wide and silent. Suddenly he understood why she had watched every doorway, why she had refused food, why she had asked whether she was safe. She had spent years learning that every kindness could carry a price. What happened after you signed? Caleb asked. I left. Why come here? She looked at him for a long moment. Because someone told me about you. Caleb frowned. Who? She smiled faintly. A woman in Tucson. She said there was a rancher in the north who once gave his last sack of flour to a family he barely knew. Caleb looked down at his hands. He remembered the family. A widow. 3 children. A broken wagon. He had forgotten the incident years ago. She had not. You came here because of a story? He asked. I came because I needed to know if it was true. Caleb met her eyes. And she looked around the quiet kitchen, at the old chair, the coffee, the plate in front of her. I think it was. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then she placed the silver bracelet on the table between them. I am not hungry anymore, she said. Caleb looked at the untouched half of the apple beside her plate. That is good. She shook her head. I mean something else. Her voice grew softer. For the first time in years, I am not hungry for a place to belong. Caleb looked at the bracelet, then back at her. He understood what she was giving him was not a secret. It was trust. And outside, far beyond the cottonwoods, a distant trail of dust was beginning to rise again. The trail of dust grew larger before Caleb could see the riders clearly. Eliza stood beside the porch, watching the southern road with a calmness that had not been there the day before. Caleb stepped outside and rested one hand against the porch rail. How many? He asked. Enough. Her answer was quiet. By noon, the first wagon appeared at the edge of the valley. Then another. Then 2 riders behind them. It was not a crowd, but word had traveled faster than either of them expected. Caleb looked toward the barn. Stay inside. Eliza shook her head. I will not hide. She stepped down from the porch and stood beside him. The wagon stopped near the fence. Several townspeople climbed down, among them the owner of the general store, the county clerk, and 2 men Caleb had known for years. No one looked particularly angry. That almost made it worse. They looked uncertain. The county clerk carried a leather folder. Caleb, he called, we need to talk. Caleb walked to the fence. About what? The clerk glanced toward Eliza. About the woman staying here. Eliza remained silent. The store owner cleared his throat. Crow says she is under contract. Caleb looked at the folder. Crow says a lot of things. A few people shifted uneasily. The clerk opened the folder. There is a legal document. There is always a document, Caleb said. That does not make it right. The clerk looked uncomfortable. You understand how this works. If she has no legal claim, Crow can request her return. Eliza finally spoke. I have a claim. She stepped forward and placed the silver bracelet on the fence post. This mark belonged to my family before the trading company came. The clerk stared at it. That is not proof. It is part of the proof. Caleb looked at her. What is the rest? She reached into the small cloth bag at her waist and produced a folded letter, worn at the edges from years of being carried. She handed it to the clerk. He read silently. His expression changed. Where did you get this? My mother. When? The night before she sent me away. The clerk read the page again. Then he looked toward the road. This changes things. The store owner frowned. What does it say? The clerk hesitated. It says the original land agreement was never surrendered. A quiet murmur moved through the group. Caleb looked at Eliza. She did not smile. She only breathed out slowly, as though she had been carrying that breath for years. Then a rider appeared on the distant road. Silas Crow. He stopped well beyond the fence and removed his hat. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply watched the people gathered around Caleb's ranch. Then he turned his horse and rode back toward town. The county clerk closed the folder. If this letter is authentic, Crow may have a serious problem. Caleb looked at Eliza. You knew this could happen. She shook her head. I hoped. There is a difference. I know. She picked up the silver bracelet and held it close. That is why I was afraid to trust anyone. Caleb looked across the valley, where the last wagon was already disappearing into the afternoon light. You trusted me. Eliza met his eyes. I am still learning how. Caleb gave a small nod. Then take your time. She looked toward the house. For the first time, she did not look at the door as an escape. She looked at it as somewhere she might return to. And Caleb realized that the town had come expecting to decide where she belonged. Instead, they had arrived just in time to watch her begin deciding that for herself. Eliza left before sunrise. Caleb knew because the coffee cup beside the stove was still warm when he found the door open. For a moment, he simply stood there, listening to the morning wind move through the cottonwoods. Then he saw the silver bracelet on the table. The crescent moon caught the first light coming through the window. Beneath it lay a small piece of paper. Caleb picked it up. Only 6 words were written there. You gave me somewhere safe. Nothing more. He read it twice. Then he looked toward the empty road. Eliza had not taken the bracelet. That bothered him more than anything else. She had carried it for years. She had guarded it like a piece of her family. Now she had left it behind. Caleb saddled his horse and rode south. He did not know where she had gone, but he knew where someone like Eliza would go if she believed her presence was becoming a burden. The old mission road. It followed the dry creek for nearly 12 miles before reaching the foothills. Caleb found her there just after sunrise, sitting beneath a cottonwood with her blanket folded beside her. She looked up when he approached. You should not have followed me. Caleb dismounted. Probably not. She almost smiled. Then why did you? He looked at the empty land around them. Because leaving without saying goodbye is not the same as choosing to leave. Eliza lowered her eyes. Your town will blame you. Maybe. Crow will make trouble. Maybe. You could lose your ranch. Caleb paused. Maybe. She looked at him then, searching his face for regret. Why are you making this harder? Caleb answered quietly. Because you keep thinking you are the hardest part. The wind moved between them. Eliza looked toward the mountains. I heard what the clerk said yesterday. He was going to help me. Then Crow arrived. Caleb nodded. I know. He offered the clerk a position. I know. He offered your neighbors better prices at the trading post if they stopped supporting me. Caleb was silent. That explained the uneasy faces from the day before. Crow was not trying to force Eliza anywhere. He was trying to make every door around her close until she had nowhere left to go. Eliza folded her hands. That is why I left. If I disappear, he has nothing to use against you. Caleb stepped closer, but kept enough distance for her to choose whether to stay. You still do not understand. She looked at him. What? You are not something Crow can use against me. Her expression softened. Caleb reached into his coat and held out the silver bracelet. You forgot this. She stared at it for a long moment before taking it. Her fingers closed around the crescent moon. I thought you might keep it. It belongs to you. And if I come back? Caleb looked toward the distant ranch, barely visible beyond the hills. Then you come back. Because you want to. Eliza breathed slowly. She had spent years believing every place came with a condition. Every meal had a price. Every roof had a rule. Every promise had a door that could close. Caleb was offering something she had almost forgotten existed. A choice. She stood and picked up her blanket. Take me home, she said. Caleb nodded. They rode north together beneath a brightening sky. Neither spoke much. But this time, Eliza was not following him because she had nowhere else to go. She was riding beside him because she had chosen the road herself. By the time Caleb and Eliza reached the ranch, the sun had climbed high above the eastern hills. The porch was quiet, but 3 riders stood near the fence. Caleb recognized the county clerk immediately. The other 2 were strangers, dressed plainly, their horses carrying the dust of a long journey. Eliza slowed her horse. Who are they? She asked. Caleb looked toward the men. I do not know. The county clerk raised one hand. Caleb Mercer, we need to speak with you. Caleb dismounted, then helped Eliza down without saying a word. She stood beside him, holding the silver bracelet beneath her palm. The clerk looked at her first, then at Caleb. Crow filed another claim this morning. Caleb sighed. Of course he did. He says the land your ranch sits on overlaps the old Redbird boundary. Eliza looked toward the distant hills. That cannot be. The clerk opened his leather folder. I thought the same thing. Then I found this. He handed Caleb a faded survey map. The paper was brittle at the edges, but the markings were clear. A narrow line crossed the valley, followed the creek, and ended near the ranch house. Eliza stepped closer. Her eyes widened. That is our boundary. The clerk nodded. Your family land may extend farther north than anyone realized. Caleb looked at the map again. Then Crow does not want her bracelet. No, the clerk said. He wants the land it proves belongs to her. The two strangers exchanged a glance. One of them finally spoke. We represent several families in the valley. Crow has been buying claims for years. Some people sold because they were tired of fighting him. Others never understood what they were signing. Eliza remained silent. Caleb looked at her. What happens now? The clerk answered carefully. There will be a hearing in town tomorrow. Eliza's expression tightened. And Crow will be there. Yes. She looked toward Caleb. You do not have to come. Caleb folded the map. I know. You could stay here. I know. Then why are you looking at me like that? Caleb gave a faint smile. Because you keep telling me what I do not have to do. She lowered her eyes. The county clerk cleared his throat. There is one more thing. He reached into the folder and produced a second document. This came from Tucson. It is a copy of a land registry from 20 years ago. Eliza took it with trembling fingers. Her eyes moved across the page. Then she stopped. My mother's name. The words were barely audible. Caleb watched her read the faded entry. For years, she had carried one small bracelet because it was all she had left of her family. Now, on a sheet of old paper, another piece of that family had returned. The clerk looked at Caleb. If this is accepted tomorrow, Crow loses his claim. Eliza folded the document carefully. And if it is rejected? Caleb looked toward the road. Far in the distance, a single rider had appeared. Even at that distance, Caleb knew the horse. Silas Crow was coming toward the ranch again. Caleb turned back to Eliza. Then we tell the truth anyway. She studied him for a long moment. You really believe that is enough? Caleb looked at the silver crescent in her hand. Sometimes truth needs a place to stand. Eliza glanced at the ranch house, then at the open land beyond it. Then I will stand with it. The rider continued toward them beneath the white Arizona sun. This time, Caleb did not step forward to meet him. He simply stood beside Eliza, shoulder to shoulder, while the old map rested between them like a promise that had waited 20 years to be remembered. The hearing ended before noon, but the silence afterward stayed with Caleb Mercer longer than any argument could have. The county clerk had placed the old registry on the table. Eliza had shown the silver bracelet, and one by one, the records had answered questions that had been buried for 20 years. Silas Crow had no claim to the Redbird land. The document he had relied upon had been signed by someone who had never owned it. By the time the judge closed the folder, Crow's confident expression had disappeared. No one cheered. No one needed to. Outside the courthouse, the Arizona sun was bright and unforgiving. Eliza stood on the wooden steps, holding the silver bracelet in one hand and the restored land papers in the other. Caleb stood beside her. It is over, he said. She looked toward the street. No, something has ended. Caleb waited. That is different. She folded the papers carefully. For 20 years, I thought my family had been taken from me. Then I thought all I had left was this bracelet. She touched the silver crescent. Now I have their name back. Caleb smiled. That is worth more than land. She looked at him. You gave me both. Caleb shook his head. I did not give you anything. It was yours. Those words stayed between them. She had heard people speak about ownership her entire life. This was the first time someone had reminded her that something could belong to her without belonging to someone else first. They rode back to the ranch that afternoon. The valley looked different, though nothing had changed. The cottonwoods still leaned over the creek. The barn still needed paint. The old mare still waited by the fence for Caleb's feed. But the house no longer felt like a place Caleb occupied alone. Eliza dismounted and walked toward the porch. She stopped beside the empty chair she had noticed on her first night. Caleb came up behind her. You can sit there now, he said. She looked at him. Are you sure? It is just a chair. She smiled. No, it is not. Caleb understood. Some objects carried memories because people gave them meaning. He opened the door and stepped aside. Eliza entered first. That evening, Caleb cooked supper. He placed cornbread, beans, roasted vegetables, and fresh apples on the table. Then he set 2 cups of coffee beside the plates. Eliza looked at the food and laughed softly. You still make terrible coffee. Caleb smiled. You still drink it. She took a sip. Maybe I am getting used to it. They ate slowly while the last sunlight faded beyond the hills. Afterward, Eliza walked to the porch carrying her silver bracelet. She placed it on the railing and looked across the valley that now belonged to her family again. Caleb joined her. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, she said, Do you remember the first day? Caleb nodded. You would not eat. She smiled. I was hungry. For what? She turned toward him. Her answer came quietly. A place where I could choose to stay. Caleb looked toward the open doorway, then back at her. And now? Eliza looked at the ranch, the hills, the old chair, and the man who had never asked her to belong to him. Now I know the difference between being kept and being welcomed. Caleb said nothing. He simply sat beside her as the evening wind moved through the cottonwoods. The silver bracelet rested between them in the fading light. And for the first time in many years, Eliza was not waiting for someone to decide where she belonged. She had chosen. That was enough.